Hey guys, let's start by thanking everybody to be here. I appreciate that. Everybody taking some time out of their Tuesday. I know it's a really nice night out there, so I appreciate you taking the time to be here with us. I think we need to start with a shameless plug. If you have not been to the SoWeLead.com website, tons of really cool resources there for you. And definitely follow us on Twitter. I want to start something a little different on Twitter, if you guys wouldn't mind getting on there. And would you post to the So We Lead Twitter handle, what would your walk-up song be? If you had a walk-up song to your classroom, what would it be? Over the next few days, if you could throw something up there, that'd be awesome. I'm going to make a playlist and share that out next week. So you can kind of get on there and see what's on the Twitter feed there with us, what we share out. And if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and just throw in a quick introduction to yourself in the chat line. That would be great, so we can kind of see who all is joining us tonight. I want to turn it over to Bill real quick before we get started. He's got a quick shout out he wants to do, and then we'll go from there, okay?
All right, welcome everybody. Hey, those of you who know me, you know that broadband for every family in Posey, Vandenberg, Gibson, Warrick has been a passion of mine for the last 2 years. And of course, this pandemic has really kind of escalated the need for that. So there's some things happening that we need to act on. Some of you have already done this, and man, I appreciate it. But I want to just talk to everyone real quick about what's happening. House Resolution 6563 is the Emergency Educational Connections Act. The key points of this proposed bill are to seek and cover costs of at-home internet service and equipment, as well as devices. This includes hotspots, modems, routers, devices, modems and routers, devices such as Chromebooks, computers, iPads. These funds could be eligible and retroactive to mid-March when the COVID-19 pandemic started. And SIPA regulations may or may not apply to this particular this law. So what this means is, if it passes, we can actually get the connection to the parents and the students that they need, and that's got to be the number one problem, I think, for all of our families throughout the region. So, number one, as educators, Amy's going to post this in the chat. We need you to sign the letter. It's very easy. You look at the letter, and if you're on a computer, it's on the right. Sign your name, where you work, boom. A lot of you have done that. Thank you. And that's really why I'm not talking right now, because I know a lot of you have done these things. I need you to call in favors. I have spent the last 24 hours calling every educator I've ever met in 28 years of service in education, begging them to do these things. Sign the letter and then do these tweets. You're going to see 3 different links. These links, if you click on them, if you are on Twitter, will take you straight to Twitter, and it'll format the tweet for you. We're gonna tag Senator Todd Young, who's like a major player in this vote. There's an educator tweet, that's for you. There's a citizen or parent tweet. Get that out to your parents. Get them tweeting. And then there's a student tweet for you high school teachers. Let's get that out. Today is the day. We've been flooding Todd with tweets and these letters all day. Let's keep it going. That's all I got.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill, for sharing that. And I know I've seen several of you already do that, so if you can keep pushing that out, that would be awesome. Hey, let's go ahead. We're going to jump in and just get started here. So tonight is a little bit of a different look. I know we've been trying to give a lot of advice and tips and strategies. What can we do in the classroom? And tonight, I just want to continue with that sharing theme that we started Tuesday and kind of take a look at this from the district or the top level, and kind of look at some of the decisions that were made, how those things go through, and really kind of be able to get a really good handle on where we are at and what is going on, because I think that a lot of times we kind of get siloed in our little area. And it's hard to see what someone else is doing and why someone else is doing. So tonight we've got several administrators with us from different levels. We've got tech coaches, that have their foot in administration and foot in the classroom still. So we've got a lot of expertise tonight, and I'm really excited about what we can see tonight. I want to first start off by letting our guests introduce themselves when we get started. Dr. Lambert, would you like to introduce yourself?
All right. Hey, thank you, first of all, for having me here tonight. I'm the Director of Secondary Curriculum and Instruction for the Warrick County School Corporation. I do oversee a lot of the technology aspects in the county. So thanks again for having me.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for joining us tonight. And Dr. Smith, he is my super. Go ahead. Could you take a second to introduce yourself?
There we go. David Smith, Superintendent EVSC. I think this is my 38th year in the EVSC. So, looking forward to the conversation and appreciate you inviting me in.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight. And like I said, we've also got Stacy Mauser and Vic, and we've got some other people. So I'm really kind of excited how this is going to work. What we're going to do is we'll let them talk for a few minutes. And while they're kind of sharing some things out, if you would put your questions and comments in the chat, and then we'll start pulling those out as we go along, kind of like we've been doing the last few days. And we'll just kind of let the conversation roll from there. Dr. Lambert, let me start with you. Can you kind of just share with us what's your first takeaway from this? Now that you've had like a few weeks to be in there and digest what's going on, what's your first take when you look at what now is distance learning in this area?
Our first take for Warrick County especially is just access to the internet. We 384 square miles. We've got a lot of land to cover. So getting every kid access, we just went one-to-one. It's our second year at the high schools 2 years ago. We're going to be one-to-one in the middles next year. And so that's been a challenge, is getting those kids access. And even in Newburgh, you would, more of a suburban area, we have some people that just want its cost and then access in some places that they just don't have access to that. So that's been our biggest problem, is that getting that access for the kids, because we want to make certain that they can get on and do the things that they need to do. And without that access, they're kind of stuck where they're at.
Was when you think about that access piece, what did you maybe, and again, I'm not trying to point fingers or whatever, but was this like a surprise kind of? Like, did you think maybe you overestimated the access that was available, or did you underestimate it, or like, where do you think you fall in that?
Sorry, my internet's been bad. What was the question again?
I was just kind of curious, like, did this really highlight any access issues that you, like, did you know there was some access issues? Did something jump out? Like, I didn't expect that when it came to access, or?
No, we knew that when we first started looking at going one-to-one, we knew that there were certain pockets in the community and the area that had very little access to the internet. I think what really caught us was that, we needed a tool in order to give kids access. And so, right now we're looking at a company called Kajit. I believe they might deal with the Evansville Corporation. They do bus routers, and they also do the hotspots that connect into the cell towers. But even that's going to be a problem too, so we have some locations that cell coverage is not all that great as well. So we're also working with another company, they own the old Citco towers. I can't think of the name of them right now. So we're in talks with them to talk about wireless coverage for the entire county. So, and that's going to be the biggest problem, being a somewhat rural area in the northern part and the central part of the county. Getting that access, the best way to do it's going to be wireless access. Laying, broadband cable, it's just not very feasible in a lot of places. But we're going to figure out, because we really think next year we're going to be probably facing the same issue when we start school next year.
Do you think this kind of accelerated some, like, you kind of saw these were like, these are some issues, but this kind of accelerated the process for you?
Absolutely. I think it really made us aware of the problems and the disparity that's out there too. You know, not just the cost of it, but again, the location is a big issue. You know, like I said, you would think, okay, Southern Indiana cell coverage should be pretty good. Well, it's not good in a lot of places. So, yeah, we're definitely accelerating that and going to figure out ways to make certain that, you know, if we're starting virtually next year, we're going to make certain our kids, especially the middle school and high school levels, have access to the internet, because that's imperative to get things done.
And I know in this group, we've talked about access several times, or, you know, already. That's a huge theme we keep coming back to. Dr. Smith, what kind of jumped out at you, your first kind of take at looking at this?
Well, you know, we've been one-to-one in our high school since 2008. So I think those that use the technology, that have a good handle on it, do that well. But I also think there's nothing that creates the need like a sense of urgency, and that's actually what we had this time around with the pandemic. I think what surprised me, though, when we've used virtual learning days for inclement weather, we always had the library open, we always had McDonald's open, and other businesses that offered free Wi-Fi. We didn't have that this time, so students that I think that had grown accustomed to that were found lacking. I think the other dynamic that we had with so many families working from home now, the demand on the internet has never been greater. And then, you know, if you only have one or two devices at home, and then parents that have to work, that have to use those devices, I mean, I think it created some capacity issues within homes. I do think, though, that according to a Bright survey, lots of our families have smartphones. So I hope that families were able to utilize that technology to assist them in hooking up their devices to the internet that way. You know, it was interesting early on, a lot of the internet providers said, hey, we'll hook you up for free for 3 months or whatever. But if you utilized providers before and were behind in your bill, that was not an option for you. So I really think this is an issue with equity. Those that have access to internet and have the devices, I think, are just fine. Those that don't, then that gap becomes even wider. So that certainly is a concern.
If Dr. Smith, if all factors were equal, when you're looking at the decisions that are being made at the top level, and I know that you're getting guidance and stuff from above, but when you're looking at, like, here's what we have to do, you know, whatever the plan might be, and all factors were equal, when you think about inequities, what is one of the key things that you start really keying in on? Like, this is like a guiding principle for us. This is something we must consider first.
Well, we say and we believe that all means all, but the reality is that is so difficult to put into practice. Even individuals, if they would have the device to take home, that without access to the internet throughout all of Vanderbilt County, then you still have equitable situations that are challenging. We've tried to fill that gap with, you know, we have the one-to-one devices. We also created a lot of packets for folks. We also made PDFs of those packets and emailed to families so that they could print them off if they had internet at home but still had capacity issues at home because of the utilization of the devices by parents. And then, you know, we have that great partnership with WNIN where we have teacher created content, and WNIN was so gracious to air 4 hours a day for the past 4 weeks, I believe. So that's a benefit. I think one of the things that I've taken away from this is that there cannot be a one size fits all, and that you have to provide opportunities through multiple platforms and through multiple venues.
But would you, and I think I know how you're going to answer this, but are all platforms equal? Are all
They're not.
equal?
No, they're definitely not. equal. And I, you know, I love technology, but there is nothing that will ever, in my view, take the place of a highly effective teacher standing in front of their students.
So.
You know, there just isn't. I think the other thing that, or some of the other things that I would like to see us do differently is to utilize more synchronous learning instead of asynchronous learning and opportunities, because we do have that capability. As you know, we use WebEx, and there's no reason why, at least where I would like to be, is where teachers can hold class. If they have a 9 o'clock class in chemistry, that they can have that 9 o'clock class through WebEx with their students. And we can have somewhat of a normal day and a normal routine. But the way that we've gone about it now, it's just very difficult to engage students, and it's difficult to really assist students.
Let me, if I can, I'm going to, Vic, I want to draw you in for a minute there, and then we'll go back to Dr. Lambert. Do you think that this will change the content that we teach?
Well, you know, our content is mostly driven by our standards, of course, but I do think one of the great benefits of this experience is that it's truly going to help us to have more of our teachers being more comfortable with blended learning. You know, and I think a lot of times in the past, many teachers were a little reluctant or just didn't feel like they had the time to jump in and really start utilizing some tech tools. And we've seen that they're having to do it now. And I think that's a real benefit. And I've been so impressed with our teachers in many ways. You know, Dr. Smith talked about the WNIN programs that we're doing. You know, we've had so many teachers that have stepped up and done unique things, and they've really stepped out of their comfort zone to help do things in many positive ways for our students and for helping each other as well. So I think that's a great thing. We've had many teachers that have been hopping on WebExes or using Zoom to chat with each other, to be able to show each other how to do a lot of things together. And I think you guys are doing a great job too. I appreciate the session that Carrie did last week. That was awesome. And we recorded it. We made that available or we took your recording and made it available for our teachers to be able to access in our intranet. So I think that's a great resource. I've got a few people that commented, said they really were benefited from that in terms of some of the tips that Carrie shared. So I think, you know, the typical thing, you know, I tell everybody, I really felt like I learned how to teach my first few years at Wrights High School because of my neighbors. And I think a lot of times, especially with technology, we've seen that some of the most effective PD with technology is when teachers get in there and use it and are guided by some other teachers that have been using it themselves. So, and we've had some of our teachers that have stepped up and helped us to do some PD. We had a teacher from Cedar Hall that did a session for us on Seesaw for the primary grades, which was phenomenal. So I think having a lot of those kind of things are really great for us and is something that I'm very encouraged by. And in terms of the content specifically, I think it will perhaps really modify more about how we're delivering the content, and maybe perhaps it will in some ways in that we're maybe able to access content differently than what we've used to in the past, and so we're able to get to some content that we probably didn't before through different technology means. And another neat thing, of course, as you know, is how many of the like I was on a conference call the other day with the Evansville Museum, and if anybody has any input you'd want to share with me about some ideas on how the museum can help to do other things to provide some virtual services. Mitch Lumen was talking about trying to make the planetarium to where they can do a virtual experience with the planetarium for our schools, thinking about opportunities that might need to be able to come this fall, if we have this same situation again. So they're looking at making some resources available for us that typically schools don't have the ability to get. And not only through our Evansville Museum, but through their partnership with other museums, like, you know, all the way to the Smithsonian, for example. So they're working on some of those partnerships to try to get some content to us that we normally don't have access to. So I think because of those kind of you know, collaborations that are going on, then I think those kind of things are going to lead to us being able to provide more and content maybe in different ways to our students down the road.
And not just Evansville, but pretty much every district out there now is tying into a lot of these new resources, aren't they?
Yes.
Dr. Lambert, what about you? When you think about secondary curriculum, Do you foresee that this is going to start to shape what or how things are taught?
Oh, I think most certainly this will this will change things. And I don't, you look at the numbers and where we're at with everything that's going on. I see this continuing a lot longer until we have a cure or a vaccination for this. But I think it's a huge shift in thinking and a huge shift in the way we do things. And I have to say, what Dr. Smith said about, technology, it's great. I love it, but it is not going to replace a teacher. Our teachers are the best, and they get in the classroom and there's something that happens there that they need to have. And that's the thing we got to figure out is what is it? Just their presence being there with kids makes a difference for all the kids in the room. The kids that came from babysitting their sister or brother all night long because mom or dad worked third shift or whatever, to give them that hug, to give them that high five. So we're going to have to figure out how to get that human connection going, because, we're looking at things too, is definitely doing, classes, just running the class. And for our teachers, for the first, this is the first time we've ever done any sort of e-learning, distance learning. They did a fantastic job. They've done some things and they've jumped on it really quick. And having only been, one-to-one for a couple of years, they've really run with it. And even the teachers that don't have the technology in the hands of the kids, if the kids had access to it, they were doing things, Flipgrid, Seesaw, those kinds of things that really were pushing things. I think we're going to have to figure out the delivery of this, and I think we're going to have to figure out how do we get the human side of this through this technology. Right now there'd be a difference of us being in a room together than there is being here on the internet. I mean, this is great and fantastic, but there's something to be said about having that human presence, and that's what we got to figure out. How do we make that leap? Because we're going to see this again and again and again, I think, as we go forward in our society and in the way the world is. It also shows how connected we are. Here's something that happened somewhere across the seas, and it happens here in, southern Indiana.
Dr. Smith, what is, and I'm sure that you're talking to the other superintendents, Indiana, probably the area. What is the talk? I mean, what is the kind of like thinking now that we're wrapping up this year? We're looking at the summer, looking at next year. Kind of what's the temperature in the room with like this top level administrators right now?
Temperature is pretty hot. The governor and I appreciate trying to open up the state again. I'm concerned that we're doing it a little bit too fast and too soon. But one of the things that concerns me the most is that we're not going to know his position on schools until the middle of July. And, we go back, at least we're scheduled to go back with our students on August the 5th. And so we're looking at a lot of contingency plans for if we have to, have half of our students in because of social distancing, what that looks like. Do we do an AB schedule? Do we do an AM, PM? How do you socially distance on a bus? We transport about 17,000 students a day. I have 600 employees that are 60 and older. That doesn't count others that have, underlying conditions that could be very problematic. We're concerned about enrollment, and are parents going to feel comfortable sending their students to school, their kids to school? So, I mean, there are just so many things that go through your mind. We've set aside about $1.5 million for PPE and things like that, but and cleaning but will we even be able to find that at that point in time? So, I think one thing is that as we open up the state again, people are either going to be more comfortable with what's going on, or they are going to. I think it's just like we're polarized from a political sense in this country. I think we're going to be polarized in those that feel like we can get back to normal, and those that just want to continue to shelter in place. But I do agree with what Walter said. I think this is not going to be the only time that we are going to be at home for an extended period of time. The difference is that when Avon was told on Sunday night that they were going to close on Monday morning, we had basically the reprieve of a week to plan to prepare. And we found out Thursday that we were going to shut down the next day, March the 13th at 5. So, you know, we had 4 or 5 days to plan last time. Now we really have at least 5 months. So when you think about the continuum of utilization of technology, I fully expect that our teachers will be more versed now when and or if we're forced to do this again. And I also think there are some positives in this. You know, we have Promethean boards in all of our classrooms, but I don't know that we really did anything but just touch the surface of how we can utilize those boards. The collaboration we have with WNIN, as we've noted, is great. I also think that the collaboration that we can do with museums, like Vic said, could be phenomenal. We could truly do virtual field trips. I think that this will motivate us and make us seek out ways to be better in the classroom. So are things going to change? Is content going to change? I think maybe we have the opportunity to be more engaging for our students and try a variety of approaches that in the past we probably were somewhat complacent and we're probably pretty settled and set in our ways. This has forced us to get out of our comfort zone, and it's probably good in many aspects.
If I can just ask you, Dr. Smith, to kind of think, let's kind of zoom out a little bit more. And again, I think all of us in the room, we know the social role that schools play in a community. Definitely, there's a lot of you in smaller towns, you know, and I know that you guys really are. I love driving through Mount Vernon because Mount Vernon's high school logo is on everything. The cop cars, the trash trucks, the street signs. That's a town that loves their schools. Is this going to change the role that schools play in a community, not just education, but the role that they play in a community?
I think it already has. Schools have become increasingly looked upon as social agencies. So when you know, we fed or provided 160,000 meals in 1 hour in April 29th, and unfortunately that wasn't enough. So I think schools are going to return to being the hub of their community in the minds of people. I think we've always been there, but I really do think schools have been taken for granted. Tara Barney, the CEO of the Southwest Indiana Chamber, called and she had a small business roundtable, and she said she was astonished at the number of small businesses that were concerned about childcare, because if schools are shut down, their workers have no access to childcare, and just the importance that school plays. I think hopefully people will no longer take us for granted and have a greater appreciation for what schools do in every aspect of a child's life: feeding, socialization, you know, academics. You know, we just do so much for the students and for their families. So I think that it will be somewhat of a renaissance in terms of the respect that schools are given.
And Natosha, if I can call on you for a second, because you're the principal here, or about to be the principal, right? Do you see that now that your job as the building principal, is that going to shift that role, that school, and those what you are going to be doing now? Is it going to change the way you look at things going on in your little micro community?
Oh, absolutely. And we've already have started to have discussions. Like, this was something we were thrown into really quick. And looking back, like, there wasn't chances to say goodbye to our kids. There wasn't that opportunity to give them that final little support, or even share with them the expectations for e-learning. We were all thrown into this in a quick system where our families really didn't understand either. So by having that moment to reflect, it has allowed us to see how vital that is, that we have our families prepared, our students prepared, and our teachers prepared with what this looks like. I think one thing we also are discovering as we're doing this, our lessons need to be about quality and not per se quantity. When you have kids that have 504s, IEPs, attention deficit disorders, and they are in an e-learning situation, they cannot sit and do a lesson that's going to require an extensive amount of time. They cannot be penalized because they are not going to have the resources at home that we are consistently able to supply them in our school homes. So taking that into consideration when we are developing activities, and I'm seeing it even as a perspective where our special education teachers and general education teachers are going to be collaborating a lot in these issues of having students prepared, where it can be like in an inclusive setting through an e-learning experience at the same time. We've already been talking about how our teachers' assistants could be utilized during this time period to help students that need that more additional one-to-one support, so that we are making sure that everyone still is a vital component. But what we did discover, I am currently an assistant principal in a junior high, and I knew that our teachers needed support. I knew that our students needed support, and our families. We conducted our ACR conferences just like norm with parents. We did it through virtual. And what I was discovering in that, I would take a pause moment and I would just say, how are you doing? And then in that moment, they would share like, I'm really struggling. I'm having a hard time helping my child, but I don't have food. So those moments of finding that out because they couldn't get to the backpack program because they didn't have transportation. So I'm loading up my pickup truck, going up there because they have a child that cannot physically get there, and they have no transportation, and delivering those to their homes, following the social distancing and things of that nature. But also the teachers, they would check in with me. I would have a weekly check-in with all teachers. It was a Google Meet, and they would share students they were concerned, students that they had in class, and they're like, I know they have a tough go. When they leave me, I'm worried about what's going on. And so they would send emails. If they didn't get a response, I was making phone calls. And so I would be speaking to parents and say, hey, we're concerned. We have noticed your kiddo hasn't been online to do a lesson. How is your, and it wasn't the approach like, hey, they're not doing anything. It was the approach, are you having problems with your technology? Are you having problems with your device? Are there some supports I can give you? And from there, the parents were always like shocked. They're like, well, they told me they were doing their work. I didn't realize they weren't, because there's not a system where they per se can see it. And after having those talks, every single parent, and the list was long, and yes, it kept me very busy. They were always like, I really appreciate you doing this. And there has to be some form of accountability that we devise in this, because we know that adolescents are your typical adolescent, just like we were at their age too. If you don't have some form of accountability of them feeling like, oh, someone is really looking at this, that is the part that's been a little tricky, is the feedback. With the e-learning, it can work great. With a packet that's being delayed coming in, that component is a little challenging. But through this, I do think it's very key, those from the higher levels down, that we're establishing how we can have those supports, and that teachers are feeling comfortable coming to us and saying, hey, I need some help in this area, or I noticed this problem occurring through our e-learning, and opening up those doors for parents to tell us. I think that is the only way we can adapt and grow. I don't know if any of you guys were experiencing this too, but we had some tech problems with different apps that we had of being overloaded with people logging on that our kids couldn't get onto. One thing that I do love, and I have to give Bill Stein and his crew a shout out, is all our students, all our parents have access to JH Help. And if they're having any problems with their device not connecting, the software not working, they send that email to Bill and his phenomenal crew, and they are immediately responding back to those parents and students, setting up times where they could trade out devices, they could get what they needed, troubleshooting and working them through the tech part. But I will tell you one major area, and then I'll be quiet, because I am passionate about this public education, and I think that is the best thing, that people can see how much our teachers love our kids because their dedication is nonstop through this, is that we have to have that social emotional learning component check-in. As I was calling through and checking in on kids, I was finding out family members had passed away. They can't get to counseling services. They are really kind of struggling or feeling overwhelmed with the anxiety of the workload. And from there, I was able to coordinate with our guidance counselors. We are fortunate to have 2 in our junior high, and they were setting up opportunities to talk to those students, whether it was through a Google Meet or through the telephone. And that gave them that system of connection that they still needed, because these are kids that usually have a twice-week check-in with our guidance counselor or with me in the office just to say how their day is going, and they didn't have that anymore. But I do think, I really like the things that I was picking up on, that we can look at in the future. What I would love to see is if we can, as districts, not be separated by our boundary lines, but come together like this more and communicate how can we share different resources that we have. One thing I definitely always appreciate with EVSC is when we have students that have been put in foster care situations that are in EVSC, they help bring the kids to a point so that they can continue to finish out their year in Mount Vernon. But maybe we can look at collectively how we can work together in e-learning settings to be supportive in numerous avenues. And I do appreciate your shout out about MV. You are absolutely right. It is a community that loves their schools, loves their kids, and is just solely vested in doing what's best.
And just to build on something that she said, show of hands, who starts their conversations with the kids like, hey, how are you doing? Or are you everything going well? How many of you just put your hands up? Yeah. Like, because I think a lot of times my kids go, oh, I thought you were calling about my homework, right? So, hey, and I want to build on, and I just want to take the last point that she took there as we start kind of rounding around the horn here a little bit. One of the questions I always ask every time I walk out of here, what's the lesson for next year, right? You know, we're wrapping things up. You know, we're all in different places on this for all different reasons. And we're just starting to kind of think like, okay, let's start gearing up for next year. And so let's kind of just take a second. What's the lesson you think that we learned here that we're going to have to put in next year, even if we're in the classroom every day, right? You know, is there something that we've learned in distance learning that we can incorporate into a classroom setting no matter what? Dr. Lambert, let me throw it to you.
Oh, that's a tough question. I think we've learned. Thanks. I think we've learned a lot from this. I think we've learned what we can and can't do with our kids, and how we motivate our kids. And again, I'm going to go back to that human connection that we have with our students, and that's never going to go away. And we're going to need that time and time again. And I think our teachers have missed the kids a lot. You hear that time and again. And I think the kids miss our teachers, even though they're the ones giving them the homework and the signing things and maybe getting on them about it. They miss that structure, and they miss that connection. So I think we've learned that, you know, as many of these technology companies out there that want to say that they can do online stuff and replace teachers, they're all wrong. They can't replace teachers, and this proved it without a doubt.
And Stacy, are you still on here? I think I saw you a second ago there still.
I am.
Okay, so I just want to, can you kind of talk about that a little bit there? Like, because I know you're coming at it from, you know, the tech side and the hardware, software kind of side, but are you starting to see things now where we can leverage the technology to elevate in other areas?
Yeah, I think that just like Vic said, taking advantage of what other teachers, what innovative things that they've done with the technology we already have. You know, how do we use something like the IPVO, those document cameras, for remote learning? Can they use those as a way to broadcast to all their students? You know, how does the Promethean board look now? They've been remote, so I think they're a lot more comfortable with their tablets. Yeah, I'm really excited. I think one of the things that we've done too is just survey the teachers just to ask them about what kind of roadblocks did they run into, or what tools were of value to them, so that we can do a lot better job this summer with PD opportunities for teachers. So I feel like all that money that we invested in technology is really being used now. So I'm really happy about that.
Are you starting to see like now we always knew we could stretch the boundaries, but now do you think it's like really encouraging people to do new things, to try new things, or to use it in a way that they didn't have before?
I sure hope so. I mean, that's always been the thing too. We always talk about trying to give them an environment where there's low risk, try new things, and then encourage our kids to try new things. That's how we learn, is take a little bit of a risk. So hopefully this has given teachers the opportunity to do that, feel better about themselves, give them a lot more confidence with using technology. I would hope that they've gained that, and that'll carry over into next year.
Trone, what about you? Do you think that the teachers that you're working with are starting to feel that comfort level come around a little bit?
Definitely in the high school level they are. And like Dr. Lambert said, I feel that with even though we've done it for only 2 years, and they've really stepped up, and I'm really impressed with all the things that they are doing with the kids during this time. So for sure.
Dr. Smith, let's turn it over to you and kind of start to wrap things up a little bit. What about you? What's the takeaway from now that we integrate into the classroom next year, even if it's face-to-face? What did we learn now that we want to start adapting and adopting next year?
Well, I think we've learned a ton, and I think we can look at the positive aspects of this. And I agree with Stacy. The sense of urgency and the situation forced us to get out of our comfort zone, and that's really when you learn about yourself and learn about new things. But I also think that it has opened our eyes up to see the possibilities that truly exist. One of the things that I am hopeful for when we do get back in person is that we actually encourage our teachers to run them as though they're remote. So I would encourage all of our teachers, while they're in the classroom, to conduct a class through WebEx, even though their students are right in front of them. That, I think, will give students a comfort level, give teachers a comfort level, and it's okay to try new things. It's not only okay, it's expected. So I think, I'm viewing this as a positive, because I think we are far better now than we were in the middle of March. And when we go back to school in August, hopefully, we're going to be far better again.
And just to kind of build on that a little bit, and I know we've talked about this before, that whole idea of connections. We've talked about connecting with the kids, and we still have to get Bill to make that T-shirt, right? Connections don't need broadband. But, I think also, too, just being able to connect with each one of us right here, right? I know that we've seen our group growing steadily over the past 2 months, and that's what we really need to continue doing, so that we're sharing that information with each other and kind of building. And by the way, and Dr. Smith, Nate Ridgway, if he's still here, that's exactly what he did. They had a couple days warning that they were going to go out, and so Nate practiced how to do a WebEx and everything with his kids before.
Yeah, I'm here. That was a really, really valuable experience for me. There's kind of a difference that I would tell a lot of people, because there's a big distinction between what we're doing now, between flipped learning, and what we're doing right now, which is emergency quarantine remote teaching, right? Those two things are not the same. And the flipped learning experience is very, very distinctive compared to kind of the current situation that we're in. So,
yeah. And it was a pretty positive experience for him, and he shared it with our group. And I think a lot of us, that's what we're getting ready to do right off the bat. I think also, too, Carrie, you did something very similar with your kids before you left for the on the 13th. But let's just kind of wrap things up. Does anyone have any kind of last parting shots they want to? Anyone in the gallery want to leave a parting shot here? Okay. Anybody? Dr. Lambert? Sorry.
Hi, John. I'm sorry. I would just like, this is Natasha again, just to hear from some of the teachers. I would love to hear things that they feel like some additional supports would be beneficial, because I believe that's how we grow. Is we need our educators to have voices towards us so we can see what are things that we can do as administrators to give those additional supports to help, or things that they see are concerns. So if there's anyone that does feel comfortable sharing, I would love to hear any reflections on that.
And we probably just ought to have like one session with that, shouldn't we, guys? Just like, hey, here's some things we need, and kind of brainstorm a group list, maybe. Dr. Smith, Dr. Lambert, any last parting thoughts?
I think, for next year, definitely we need to be ready for anything. Plan for the worst, hope for the best. PD is going to be a big thing for our teachers going forward, and let's just keep praying that this is going to end at some time, and hopefully sooner than later.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I just appreciate the opportunity to be on here and to talk to folks, and thank everybody for what they're doing for kids. It truly is phenomenal. And, one of our goals in all of this is to emerge stronger than we were before. And I think we'll be able to do that. But just keep focused on kids, keep doing the right thing, and good things can happen.
Excellent. Hey, guys, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. And you are free to hang out with each other. If you want to continue hanging out after this, that is fine. That's probably a great thing for us to do, to keep building those connections, or just talking to adults periodically. And if you have not registered, if you did not do the reservation form, you probably ought to, so that we can send you out the PGP form and get you those points. And also the feedback, we definitely like that. I know that we've had several requests for some special ed help, and I know that we're working on something to get some of that for you as well. So hopefully we can be able to knock that out here soon. Thank you all very much, guys. I appreciate your time. Thanks, guys.
Hey, John, can I answer Natasha's question real fast?
Yeah, sure.
I think one thing that I would like to see as far as like professional development or support for teacher as we go back, or even if we are doing synchronous learning or continued synchronous learning, is like my classroom management. I think the students really trusted that I could enforce certain rules. But in this environment, in week 2, that was questioned when another student said, hey, I'm having a problem with Joey. Can you help me? And then Joey doesn't respond, doesn't pick up the phone, no longer joins classes. So I think that classroom management aspect is going to have to take some navigating and just support from administration. Like, what is the process of a student? Do we just mute them? Do we just, if they're being belligerent or obnoxious, do we cut off their learning opportunity in that moment to save everybody else's? Or, how do you follow that up in the environment of, Johnny, you were bad today in the classroom environment. What's the follow through? And I think that's where, I built the respect and camaraderie of my students. If we had that, this is an environment that is safe for one another, where we're looking out for one another. But when you don't have that follow through, you're making empty threats and, pay attention, please stop doing that. Like, what does that look like in the fall? And that's, I can do the learning, I can do the lesson planning, but the classroom management is just going to be a new beast in itself. That has me just thinking now what that will look like.
Carrie, are you talking about classroom management online?
Yeah, if we don't, if we transition to an online environment, or if we're going back and forth, and we're doing, if if we are doing synchronous learning, so in a live environment, and you have someone that is constantly belligerent in the class or disruptive in the class, do you just mute them? Do you kick them out of them? Like,
Right.
it is not the same where you can do it in class. We say, hey, let's have a private chat, because you're not in a private environment.
Right, right.
And the student can choose not to pick up the phone call or just piece out of the class. Like, what does that look like?
Let's put that on the list and see if we can't bring somebody in. That would probably be a really good conversation to have. That'd be a really good Amy, does that fall under the applied digital skills, or that's a little outside that realm, isn't it?
As far as the classroom management piece?
Yeah.
No, it's more like the technical skills that students would need. I mean, there is a lesson on, navigating Google Meet and things like that, but I think this probably goes beyond that.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So, I mean, there is a piece there with that norms and ethics and yeah, but okay. Well, hey, Carrie, let me look around and see what I can find for us on that. I might know somebody that we can, maybe can at least point me in the right direction.
Or maybe Chris. I mean, seeing how she maintains classroom behavior in an all online environment.
Yeah, or maybe Chris's principal would be, or maybe they've got somebody that would be really good with that too. I was also thinking about what's Indiana Distant High School?
Connection Academy? Academy?
The one up in Duggar, Linton. Linton Duggar, Union County. I forget that school's name. I'll look around and see. We'll find somebody, Carrie, okay?
My touch base with Stacy Heron, within
Lambert. Yeah. Stacy would probably be good too. I didn't think about her. Thanks, Stacy. Poor Stacy. Awesome. Hey guys, thanks a lot. I'm going to go downstairs, see what the kids are up to. Make sure that I still have all of them down there still. Thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it.